Well, good morning, everyone. This is going to be an adventure for you as well as for me. It's been on the calendar for quite a while, but my thought process was, it's a long ways away. Eventually I'll get to it. I don't know if you've ever seen these little things. They call them round to-its. Have you ever seen a round to-it? Well, I didn't get that round to-it very early. And part of what was I kept thinking, well, you've got a one-time class. What are you going to talk about, and what are you going to bring up, and where are you going to find it? And so I was kind of struggling with all of that and kind of wondering where that was going to come from and all of that sort of thing. And I kind of had an idea, and then over the last 3 weeks, I've traveled quite a bit from Kansas to Missouri to, where were we, Wisconsin, Minnesota. We were in the Dakotas, North and South Dakota, and saw the majesty of creation in a lot of areas. And it really came to me this last week. I guess it was a week ago today. We were out on tour, and we were finishing up the tour, and we'd been to the Dakotas. We'd been to North Dakota up at Bismarck, Roosevelt's National Park in outside of Bismarck, up in that area. We'd been to the Black Hills, to Mount Rushmore, and saw all of that, and took not necessarily a wrong road. It was just not a road that was really very bus friendly. The passengers got a lot of scenery. I got a lot of stress. You ever taken a bus on a hairpin curve? 45, you're 45 feet. Normal car is what? 12, 14, 16, something like that. They survived as well as me. We had a good laugh about it, but I will not do that again, at least on that particular road. I was smart enough to check it out earlier, but there is a road I think they call it coming out of Keystone in South Dakota called, I think they call it the Iron Mountain Road. And if you pull it up on Google Map and look at it real close, you'll see some really tight hairpins, and then you'll see what they call pigtails. I don't know what a pigtail looks like, because I was smart enough not to get on the bus with that. And they have some really narrow tunnels that you're not going to get through. So I was smart enough to miss that one, but I did give my folks a nice ride through a very scenic shortcut. Anyway, all that said, the tour went out, and it was impressive with the Black Hills and all of that, but we went to the Badlands. I think it was a week ago. Today is where we up there in South Dakota. And if you've not seen the Badlands, they're quite an interesting geological phenomena. And we had a step-on guide. And what those people do is they get on ride with you, and they tell the people about where we're at, and every now and then they'll tell the driver, oh, you're supposed to turn here, type of thing. But this guy was really good, and he was telling about the history of the Badlands. And the one thing that really struck me is he talked about that area having been underwater at some point in time, having been under a sea. And that then this particular term he used for I don't remember if it was the eastern or the western something of slope of a sea, it came up, and now you've got the Badlands there because the water receded, and it left the mineral deposits, and it left the fossil of the marine life and all that sort of thing, which constitutes what they call the Badlands. The cavities, the canyon type things, the spires that come up out of there. And so it got me to thinking about creation. And in about a month from now, going to be out in what's called the Canyon Lands, which I'm really looking forward to, but we're going to be going to the Grand Canyon and Bryce Canyon, Zion National Park, Moab, the Arches, and maybe a few other places that haven't seen everything yet, and I'm looking forward to seeing that because of the creation. Anyway, that all leads back to thinking, okay, well, I think I'll just talk about creation and how that came about, because it kind of fascinates me in a way, perplexes me maybe in a way of creation. How did all this come about when at one point in time we can scientifically go back and say, yes, there was an ocean over Kansas and the Dakotas and probably parts of Oklahoma and Texas and all this inner area of our country. How did that all come about, or how did that all change? So I thought, okay, we'll talk about creation, and so I started reading on that. And then late in my process of things, I came across this study guide that Liz had ordered at some point in time, and it was in her room. And guys, you know, you don't go in and mess with your wife's stuff. And so the other night I pulled it up and thought, okay, well, this will have some interesting information. Okay, it's changed my whole perception on how the creation, not how the creation, but the idea of creation and the way that it was written. And so I want to try and give you a little bit of a taste of that. I'm not as prepared as I'd like to be because I haven't had as much time to think about this and gather all of it together and put it in a really nice, compact thing. But I'm going to throw some tidbits out there for you. And so if you have a question, leave it for Curtis or someone like that, part of it. But if you want to, if you have your Bible with you, if you have have it on there, just Genesis 1, and we're gonna look at that. Now, the premise that we're going to change about when you hear or see or think about the word create, what does that bring to your mind? This is an open discussion. If I said to create something, what would you think that you were going to do?
Build.
You were going to build something. You're going to make something. You're going to construct something. And that's always, and if you've probably read the first, it reads, God created. What's your thought process on that? God made something, built something. Would that be a fair assumption? Yes. We are going to look at this from a viewpoint of the Easterner, from the viewpoint of Moses, the way he might have thought, and the way that the mindset, according to what the notes I've got in here, talk about how the Eastern culture would have perceived understanding this. And so it has opened a whole new idea to me, and so I want to try to give you folks a little bit of an idea of what that will, so that when you maybe go to read this again, you look at it a little bit differently. So, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Pretty simple. Well, the mindset, and a lot of this comes from Egyptian as well as Babylonian thoughts, that Eastern mentality, the Eastern thinking of things, that in the beginning was not just a point in time, it was the beginning of a period. And so we know that however long it was, the creation was a 7-day process. It began here and it ended here. And so what part of the thinking is that in the beginning was not a specific date, but it was the beginning of a process, is what the thoughts that they have here. And again, we talked about created. If you don't, I hope you will let me, or not let this bother you, but I may read some of this to you because I can't remember all of it, and it's got a couple of really big words in there that I may throw them out to you and let you define them. In the beginning of the Old Testament, beginning refers to a preliminary period of time rather than in a first of a series of events. In English, we might refer to such an initial period as the primordial period. Well, you're going to say, what is a primordial period? Thanks to the app on the telephone, on my phone, and goes to the dictionary, it's referring to something in the beginning, something that starts, something that's primal, something that's a beginning. So this is referencing to the beginning of the process here, and that's what is talking about here. Now, verse 2, the earth was formless and empty, darkness was over the surface of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the waters. When I stopped and read this for the first time, this was kind of eye-opening in itself, in its sense too, because probably over 60 years of church life, not taking into the first 10 years, but over 60 years of church life, I don't know that I've ever spent very much time with anyone or any class talking about in the creation of the earth, or creation as we're talking about here, this 7-day period of time. And so I'm finding this to be quite interesting here. Okay. Formless, empty, darkness was over the surface of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the waters. Earth was a blob. There wasn't anything there. If you can put that into your mindset, it was just nothing out there. Or appears to be nothing anyway. And when the Easterner thinks about something being created, at least in the thought process and the notes that I have here, it is something that is related to something having a function. Not a form, but something having a function. It was created to do something. And so that's what is a whole different mindset, at least it is to me, that the creation. Let me read this for you. In our culture, we consider existence to be either material, which is having molecules taking up space and extending to energy or subatomic particles, or experiential, I think I'm saying that right, which is abstractions such as love or time. These definitions, however, are culturally determined. By contrast, in the ancient world, something existed when it had a function. It had a role to play. So at this particular point in time, the earth had no role to play. There was nothing that existed that had a role under the understanding of the Eastern culture, which again is different from our understanding, and we're removed several thousands of years from that, but that's the way that they looked at things. It goes on to say that in Mesopotamia, one of the ways to accomplish this was to name something, and that described its function or a role. And the actual Hebrew verb for create is bara, B-A-R-A. And it also focuses our attention to this direction. In the Bible, only God can perform this action of bringing something into existence. what is even more intriguing is that the objects of this verb point consistently towards its connection to functional existence rather than material existence. For example, God creates fire, cloud, destruction, calamity, darkness, righteousness, and purity. Those are all actions. Those are all functions. Those are all something that carries on. And this is much like the ancient Near Eastern way of thinking, that it was more important to determine who controlled functions rather than who gave something its physical form. In the ancient world, something was created when it was given a function. In the ancient world, the cosmos is less like a machine than more like a kingdom. So when God created in their mind and he began to do something, he gave it a function, something to be done over there. So formless and empty, darkness was over the surface of the deep. That was how it was explained to begin with. And then in verse 3, God said, "Let there be light." There was light. God saw that the light was good, and he separated the light from the darkness. God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And there was evening, there was morning, the first day. The Near Easterners, in their thought process, did not put the sun and the moon together yet with this idea of light. Light was just light. It's like a cloudy day. There was light, there was darkness, but there was not anything to separate that. So they did not see light as something that was generated by the sun or something that was generated by the moon. It just was, and that's the way that they looked at a lot of their parts of it.
Could it have been God's light?
Pardon me?
Could it be that it was God that was giving the light from him?
When you say from him, how do you mean because he had the power to give the light?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, it was. I mean, yes. God was providing the light, and he was providing the dark because right, he still gave light, and that he separated the light and the darkness. So you had and then this brought about the concept of time. This was the concept of time for the early Easterner, was light and dark. That began a concept of time for them. And then when the moon and the stars and everything else came, that was just kind of a little bit of a bonus from the standpoint of, I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself, but we'll still go there. If you'll jump down to, where is it? Verse 14. The lights in the vault of the sky to separate the day and the night, and then he put the moon, the sun, the stars, all in there, and he to designate time, as well as he put the writer goes on and says, the lights of the vault of the sky to give light to the earth. He made two great lights, the greater light to govern the day and the lesser to govern the night, and he also made the stars. God set them in the vault of the sky to give light on the earth, to govern the day and the night, and to separate light from darkness. Then God said that it was good, and there was evening, and there was morning, and it was the fourth day. I'm not seeing what... back up in verse 14. Let there be lights in the vault of the sky to separate the day from the night, and let them serve as signs to mark sacred times and days and years. The Easterners also knew how to read the stars once they became available, and read the days and all of that sort. I'll get to you in a minute. And read all the stars and the lights and the things like that. But they, and we use them now as guidance. You know, if the early navigators used the sun, used the moon, used the stars because they stayed in the same spot, or they could use them. The earth moved, but the stars didn't move. And then the certain stars were for certain things, later on with festivals, with the sun and the moon, and how time was developed. And so God had put those in place for a lot of that sort of thing on there. And okay, let me back up just a second here. This is it. The other interesting one here is when you get into verse 6, and God said, "Let there be a vault between the waters to separate water from water." So God made the vault and separated under this vault from the water above it, and it was so. God called the vault sky, and there was evening and there was morning the second day. This is very interesting from a standpoint of what's a vault. So you have to have a little bit of a definition of it. Well, it's a separation. When the earth was formless and empty and darkness over the surface, there was water over the whole surface of the earth. And at some point in time, as this creation was going on, that water was separated and this vault was formed. And the early Easterners felt like this vault was solid. So it took water that was above and it took water that was below. God took the land and separated the land from the water, and they viewed the land to be one large flat disk, more or less. They had no concept of the roundness of the world, which I don't know how you would, because there was no way to see it yet from that standpoint. But they saw that vault, and they saw that vault as being solid. And so the idea of if we were to present the idea of air travel or space travel to an Easterner of that particular point in time, it couldn't be, because the vault was solid. And what the vault did is it separated these heavenly waters from the earth, protected the earth from those waters that were considered by a lot of them to be chaos. They were waters that were being held in place by God for God to use them in any particular way He felt necessary at any particular time. And so as it continued on, the vault then became such as they'd say, well, there were openings in the vault. That's where rain would come from. That's where dew would come from. But if the torrential downpour came, that was water from above this vault that was opened up in some way or another. And so that is what when he's talking about the vault between the waters to separate water from water, it was separating the heavenly water, which we would look at as clouds and rain and things like that, away from the earthly water, which God called the seas when He separated the water. So that was one difference that they looked at, and that was one of the separations. I think in verse 9 is where it comes back to kind of makes me think about how a lot of what we see when we travel and see some of these places where this was formed, it brings in a ton of questions to me as to where and what and how. But God said, "Let the water under the sky be gathered into one place, and let the dry ground appear." And it was so. God called the dry ground land, and the gathered the waters He called seas, and God said it was good. This might be the geologist, and I think they're called paleontologists. Is that anybody know any definition of a paleontologist? Good, I can use it and you won't know any different, right? Okay. I think those are people that study the formation. I mean, I know the geology people do, but study the formation of everything.
Geologist is you're talking about geology.
Well, yeah, what did I say?
It's a cosmologist. Cosmologists study the formation of the earth.
Yeah. Yeah.
If that's what you're.
Well, there's all those sorts of people that study the formation of the earth, and they've all got nice titles, geology, and all that other good stuff out there. But now I forgot where I was going with this. Yeah, something about a paleontologist. It was a nice big word that I can pronounce, and I threw it out there for you. Let's see. I'm sorry, I lost the whole train right there. Oh, it brought me back to what the guide was telling us about the Badlands and other places that have developed like that. This separation might have been the upheaval that they talk about. They being the people that study the formation of the earth, whatever ology they are, talk about the upheaval, that the ground heaved up or the mountains heaved. Do I need to stay in focus here? That the grounds heave up or that sort of thing. And so, you know, when this guy was talking about that, it just got me to thinking about that because I had never thought about it from a standpoint of from the creation standpoint. I just had thought about, my mind was back at the created point where he built something and not where it had a form or a function to take into place. So that got me to thinking about the way that the creation went about, and that's the first bell. So how much more do I have to spin here? You gotta give 5 minutes to drag? Okay.
He said you'd get back to me.
Okay, what was it?
Okay, what I was reading was, and God said, let there be a ferment in the midst of the waters and let it divide in the waters from water. What are they reading?
No, the firmament is what this version is calling a vault. It's a separation. God separated what you could consider to be the heavenly waters, which in most of our thoughts would be rain and there and then in other passages, I think Psalm and other places talk about there are compartments for rain and snow and hail, and I mean he's using that as descriptive analogy type thing. But there is a separation between the seas and the waters below. Before, they were all right here. The earth was void, formless, shapeless, and covered in darkness. There was nothing there. And then God looked at that and decided that it was time to make something out of nothing, if you'll allow me to use it that way. And that's what he began. Jim?
I was watching on television this week, and they showed the rains in Death Valley and all the destruction of the water. And I thought about in the ancient East how where they had lived in an area that's kind of like that. So when rain came like that, that was destruction. And you were mentioning chaos, you know, of the water up there. And I remember reading about the ancient Sumerians and stuff, how they lived in a land where this destruction would come. And the religion they were seeking was to save them from stuff like this. And I wonder if all this kind of piled in there because Moses grew up in Egypt, and he would have had maybe that kind of teaching in the palace and stuff, where they would come up with those ideas about mystery and everything. And then when Moses wrote Genesis, this is what shifted in when you talk about that ancient Eastern mind.
I think so. I think from the standpoint, Jim makes a good point there, that Moses did grow up in an Egyptian environment, was trained in Egypt, was schooled in Egypt. And when this particular study Bible so far takes into account, they're taking into account mythologies, They're taking in account of early writings of Egyptians. They're taking in account early writings of Mesopotamia, and putting that all together to give an idea of what was the mindset, how did the mind of the early Easterner, who really this was written about, how did they think about these things? So I've wandered around all this thing this morning, and I apologize for that, because when I got to reading in this thing, it scrambled my brain a little bit as to how I wanted to try to put it out. But I think the thing that I'd like for you to think about is that the way that at least the creation was written about early on, think about it more as being something that was created, was made because it had a function. It was going to function in some way or another. The land was going to produce fruit and bear more. The sky was separated so that the seas could do what they were going to do. There would be moisture that when it rained or when dew came, it had that thing. There was anything that was done had a relevance of a function, and just wasn't built. If that makes any sense to you. So I guess second bell rang, so I can let you go. Thanks for your attention. Thanks for letting me wander all over this thing. So maybe we'll tackle a little bit more of this at some other point in time. Thanks.